My mother, a woman who faked illnesses to keep me trapped as her personal ATM, sabotaged my career and then had the audacity to call me her biggest burden. She thought I would break. She thought I would apologize. She had no idea I was about to take her own cruel words and use them to sign her into a permanent residence she would pay for herself. Before I tell you how I finally put that burden down, let me know in the comments. What's the most selfless thing you've ever done for family that went completely unappreciated? I want to honor the silent sacrifices. And if you're tired of toxic people getting away with it, please consider subscribing. It helps more stories of righteous justice find their voice. Now let me tell you my truth. My life for the past 5 years had been a masterclass in servitude, disguised as filial duty. It all started with my mother Diana's health scare. A minor bout of vertigo, diagnosed and resolved within a week, became her lifelong golden ticket to my perpetual indenturement. I was a successful architect on the cusp of a promotion at a top firm in the city. But at the first sign of my mother's performative frailty, I did what any loving daughter would do. I put my career on hold, gave up my apartment and moved back into my childhood bedroom to help her recover. The recovery of course never came. My daily routine was a relentless cycle of catering to a tyrant. My mornings began not with architectural blueprints, but with Diana's complex medication schedule. A rainbow of vitamins and supplements that were more about the ritual of being cared for than any actual medical necessity. I would then prepare her breakfast, something healthy and gourmet, only to have her push it around her plate and sigh, "A little bland, Anna. My palate is more refined, you know." The real work was financial. Under the guise of needing my help, she had slowly, systematically drained my life savings. My father had left her comfortably well off, but Diana's appetite for luxury was insatiable. "Anna dear," she'd say, her voice dripping with manufactured helplessness, "the country club is having its annual membership drive. It would do my spirits so much good to socialize, but my accounts are just so complicated. Could you just put it on your card for now? We'll sort it out later." Later, of course, never came. My credit cards paid for her designer clothes, her weekly spa treatments, her imported wine club subscriptions. Just last month she'd fixated on a ridiculously expensive Italian leather handbag she saw a friend carrying. She'd sighed dramatically for days about how her old bags were so dated, and how it was so important to keep up appearances. When I gently suggested it was out of her budget, she'd clutched her heart. "Oh, the stress," she'd gasped. "I just thought you would want me to be happy. Don't you want your mother to be happy, Anna?" The guilt, expertly wielded, worked its magic. I bought her the purse, a purchase that wiped out what was left of my personal savings account. Her cruelty was most potent when she was performing. She loved to host luncheons for her wealthy, catty friends, turning our home into a stage for her one-woman show. The week before my world fell apart, she hosted such a gathering. I spent 2 days preparing, cooking a complex multi-course meal while she rested her nerves. During the party, I was a ghost in an apron, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates while she held court. One of her friends, a woman named Beatrice with a face pulled impossibly tight, turned to me. "Anna dear," she said, "your mother tells us you were some sort of architect? Such a demanding field. Are you still keeping up with your little hobby?" Before I could form a reply, my mother jumped in, her voice a symphony of false modesty and pity. "Oh, Anna is just so devoted to me right now," she said, patting my hand with a dismissive gesture. "It's wonderful, but I do worry she's letting her little architecture hobby fall by the wayside. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of high-pressure world, you know. It takes a certain grit." She looked me up and down, a faint, pitying smile on her lips. I always told her she was more suited to a supportive role. Her friends nodded in sage agreement, their eyes filled with a condescending sympathy that was more insulting than outright mockery. I stood there, humiliated, my accomplishments reduced to a little hobby, my character assessed and found wanting in front of a jury of my mother's clones. I was a prop, brought out to demonstrate my mother's noble suffering and my own charming inadequacy. That night, after I'd finished cleaning up the last of the party mess, I had my weekly secret phone call with my Uncle Ben, my mother's weary younger brother. He was the only one who saw the truth. "How'd the luncheon go?" he asked, his voice already laced with a familiar resignation. I told him what happened, what Diana had said. I heard him sigh, a heavy, tired sound that traveled across the phone lines. "Anna, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping. Be careful. Especially with your money. She did the same thing to my mother, her own mother. When Grandma got sick, Diana swooped in, took control of her finances, called it helping. By the time Grandma passed, her savings were gone. Diana redecorated her entire house and took a cruise to Spain. Please, kiddo, don't let her run you into the ground the way she did everyone else. His words were a small, vital lifeline, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy. But they also planted a new seed of cold fear. This wasn't just narcissism. This was a pattern. A predatory practiced routine. And I was her next target. After years of stagnation, a flicker of my old life, my real life, finally ignited. A former colleague reached out with an incredible opportunity. A boutique hotel developer was looking for a fresh, innovative design, and my old boss had recommended me. It was a major contract, a career-defining project. Winning it wouldn't just mean financial freedom. It would mean I could finally, legitimately escape. I could afford my own apartment again, far away from my mother's suffocating orbit. It was my one shot at reclaiming my life. I threw myself into the work with a passion I thought had long since died. For weeks, I worked late into the night in my childhood bedroom, the familiar scent of old books mixing with the sharp, clean smell of architectural paper. I was alive again. My designs were ambitious, modern, and I knew brilliant. The final presentation was scheduled for a Monday morning. It was the most important meeting of my professional life. On Sunday night, I was in the dining room, the large table covered with my final presentation boards, my laptop open to the digital version of my slideshow. I was rehearsing my pitch, my voice filled with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. Diana drifted into the room wearing a silk robe, a glass of expensive red wine in her hand. She watched me for a moment, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. Still playing with your little drawings, Anna? She said, her tone a mixture of pity and disdain. You'd think at your age you'd be planning a wedding, not a building. It's a major career opportunity, Mom, I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. If I land this, it could change everything. Oh, I'm sure, she said, wandering closer to the table, her movements a little too careless. But you mustn't get your hopes up, dear. Disappointment is so unbecoming. And then it happened. With a movement that was both theatrical and horrifyingly precise, she tripped on the edge of the rug. Her arm flew out, and the entire glass of dark, staining Cabernet Sauvignon arced through the air, crashing down directly onto the center of my laptop keyboard and splashing across my pristine architectural drawings. A deafening silence filled the room. I stared at the scene of absolute devastation. The wine was seeping into the guts of my laptop, which sputtered, hissed, and went black. The intricate lines of my drawings were bleeding into grotesque purple Rorschach blots. Years of my future, my one chance at escape, were dissolving into an alcohol-soaked ruin right before my eyes. I looked up at my mother, expecting to see a flicker of shock, of remorse. There was none. Instead, her face began to crumple, her eyes filling with tears. But they were not tears for me. They were tears for herself. Oh, look what you've made me do, she wailed, her voice rising in a hysterical crescendo. All this stress. This pressure you put on me with your silly little projects. You never think about how your ambitions affect my delicate nerves. I just stared at her, my mind numb. It wasn't an accident. An accident is clumsy. This was sabotage. A deliberate, malicious act designed to keep me here, to keep me trapped, to ensure her caregiver and her bank account never left. Mom. I started, my voice trembling. That was my only copy. My presentation is tomorrow. The crocodile tears vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold, hard glare. Well, don't just stand there gawking, you clumsy girl. Get a cloth. You've made a terrible mess on the Persian rug. This is exactly what I mean. You're so careless. So wrapped up in your own little world. She pointed a trembling finger at the mess. Clean it up. Now. No, I whispered, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. Her face contorted in disbelief. What did you just say to me? I said no, I repeated, a bit stronger this time. I'm not cleaning up the mess you made. Her rage was biblical. How dare you, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. After everything I've done for you, the sacrifices I've made. Your father, God rest his soul, at least he knew how to provide for me, how to put his family first. You just take You take up space in my house, you take my energy, and now you want to take away my peace with your selfish dreams." She then pivoted with breathtaking hypocrisy. "You are just like your father, always putting your selfish little hobbies before me. You're a failed daughter, Anna." She wasn't finished. She clutched her chest, her voice reaching a fever pitch of manipulative self-pity. "You see what you do to me? You care more about your silly buildings than your own mother, who has sacrificed everything for you." She took a shuddering breath, her eyes blazing with a cold, clear resentment that was terrifying in its intensity. "God," she screamed, the word echoing in the silent house, "you have been my biggest burden since the day you were born." And there was the truth in all its ugly, unvarnished glory. Burden. Not daughter. Not love. Burden. Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the last fragile pieces of the daughter I had tried so hard to be. The love, the duty, the guilt, it all vanished, burned away by the white-hot clarity of that single monstrous word. I looked at the sobbing, theatrical woman before me, and I no longer saw my mother. I saw my jailer. And I knew with a certainty that was as cold and hard as steel, that my escape would not be through a career. It would be through her utter and complete removal from my life. The aftermath of the sabotage was a strange, hollow silence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The emotional part of my brain, the part that would normally be reeling from the betrayal and the loss of my career-defining project, simply shut down. In its place, my architect's mind took over, the part that assesses structural failures and designs new, stronger foundations. My mother's act of destruction wasn't just an attack, it was a data point. It was the final, undeniable piece of evidence in a long-term case study of her narcissistic pathology. She continued her performance for another hour, wailing about her nerves and the stress I had put her under. I just watched her, my expression unreadable. I saw her not as my mother but as a system of control, a complex machine designed for a single purpose, to consume my life to fuel her own. And I realized a fundamental truth. You cannot reason with a system like that. You can't plead with it. You can't change it. You can only disconnect it from its power source. The next morning I did something that shocked her into silence. I apologized. Profusely. "You were right, Mom," I said, my voice dripping with a false, saccharine sincerity. "I've been so selfish. I haven't been thinking about your needs, your health. My career can wait. You are my priority." A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She had won. That night, after emailing the developer to withdraw from the project, I sat down at my desk, not with a sense of defeat but with a cold purpose. Before planning my mother's future, I needed to fully understand what she had done to mine. I pulled up my online banking portal and my credit card statements. For the first time, I forced myself to look at the unfiltered truth of the last 5 years. The numbers on the screen told a story more brutal than any insult she could scream. Line after line of my money siphoned away. The emergency cashmere sweater for her cruise. The medically necessary weekly deep tissue massage. The investment Italian handbag that cost more than my first car's down payment. I saw the restaurant bills from her lavish luncheons, the charges from the wine club, the endless stream of online purchases for things she didn't need but simply wanted. I had been subsidizing a lifestyle I could never dream of affording for myself. I calculated the total. It was a staggering amount. It was my apartment down payment. It was my retirement fund. It was my freedom. I wasn't just emotionally trapped. I was financially imprisoned. The realization was a physical blow. There was no escape. Even if I walked out the door tomorrow, I had nothing. No savings, a mountain of credit card debt I'd taken on for her, and a 5-year gap in my career. She hadn't just kept me in her house. She had systematically destroyed my ability to ever leave it. That was her real cage. But as I stared at the ruin of my finances, I didn't feel despair. I felt a strange, liberating rage. She had taken everything, which meant I had nothing left to lose. I opened a new browser window. My search terms were not boutique hotel design. They were high-end assisted living, luxury senior communities, and long-term managed care facilities. I was no longer designing a building for strangers. I was designing a cage for my mother. A beautiful, comfortable, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. A place where the financial arrangements were ironclad and her ability to manipulate and drain the people around her would be reduced to zero. My plan began to form, A complex, multi-stage project with a clear, singular goal. The architect in me was awake again, but this time the structure I was designing was not made of steel and glass. It was made of cunning, deception, and the cold, hard promise of justice. My plan was a delicate piece of social architecture, built on a foundation of my mother's two defining characteristics: her bottomless vanity and her equally deep-seated greed. To get her to walk willingly into her own cage, I couldn't present it as a cage. I had to present it as a throne. I spent a week gathering my materials. I downloaded the most luxurious-looking brochures from the most expensive assisted living facilities in the region. I chose the one with the most ostentatious name, the Primrose Estate. It looked less like a five-star resort and more like a private country club, complete with photos of smiling, silver-haired residents engaged in wine tastings, art classes, and chauffeured outings. Then I began to lay the groundwork. I feigned a newfound interest in financial investments. "Mom," I said one evening over dinner, my voice full of a manufactured excitement, "I've been reading about these new lifestyle investment opportunities. They're for high-net-worth individuals. You invest in an exclusive community and you not only get a place to live, but you get a share of the profits. It's what all the really wealthy people are doing now." Her ears perked up at the words high net worth and exclusive. I had her attention. I let the idea simmer for a few days before I presented her with the brochures for the Primrose Estate. "I found one, Mom," I said, spreading the glossy pages on the coffee table. "It's called the Platinum Tier Founding Residence Program. It's invitationally, but because of my connections, I managed to get us a prospectus." I had, of course, just printed their public brochure and invented the entire investment scheme. But to Diana, blinded by the images of manicured lawns and fine dining rooms, it was completely plausible. She saw herself in those pictures. She saw a life of effortless luxury surrounded by people of her own caliber, a life where she could finally be the queen she always believed she was. "A share of the profits, you say?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "That's right," I lied smoothly. "You put your assets into the estate's investment fund and you get a dividend. Plus you get to live there, all expenses paid. It's a genius move for someone with a portfolio like yours." This was the final, crucial part of the trap. "The only issue," I said, feigning concern, "is that to get you into the platinum tier, they need all of your assets consolidated into a single trust. It's an administrative thing for the investment. It's very complicated. The only way to do it quickly is if you give me power of attorney. Just temporarily, of course. To sign the papers and get everything set up in your name." I held my breath. This was the moment my entire plan hinged upon. For a woman as controlling as my mother, giving up even a sliver of power was unthinkable. But I was betting on a simple equation, that her greed would be stronger than her paranoia. I was betting that the vision of herself as a wealthy, revered founding resident would be so intoxicating that she would overlook the risk. She hesitated, her brow furrowed. I could see the internal struggle. I decided to add one more layer to the bait. "Of course," I added with a sigh, "we can forget the whole thing. It's probably too much trouble. I'll just keep working my job and we can keep going as we are." I made a move to gather the brochures, and that's what sealed it. The fear of losing the opportunity was greater than her fear of being controlled. "No, wait," she snapped. Then, composing herself, she adopted an air of magnanimous sacrifice. "If it's what's required to secure my financial future, then I suppose it's for the best. You're so much better at all that complicated paperwork anyway, dear." She waved a dismissive hand. "Arrange for the papers to be drawn up. I'll sign them." It was that easy. The key to her own prison handed over willingly. The next day I contacted a mobile notary service. A polite, professional woman arrived at our house precisely on schedule, her briefcase containing the ironclad power of attorney document I'd had drafted online. The signing ceremony took place at our dining room table. The notary laid out the documents with an impersonal efficiency that made the moment feel both chillingly official and surreally mundane. My mother made a grand show of it, brandishing my expensive fountain pen like a queen signing a treaty. "Now, Anna," she lectured as the notary patiently waited, "this is a very important trust I'm placing in you. See that you handle it with the respect my finances deserve. This is a big step for me and a big opportunity for you to finally prove your worth." My mother signed with a flourish. The notary calmly asked for her ID, verified her signature, and then applied her official stamp with a firm, decisive thud. The embossed seal was the final legal consecration of my deception. My mother was so blinded by the vision of the luxurious life she felt she deserved. She never once stopped to question the motives of the daughter she had so thoroughly and so recently wronged. The trap was baited. The cage door was open. All that was left was to escort her inside. The day I drove my mother to the Primrose estate was a masterclass in performance art. I played the part of the doting, excited daughter, chattering about the investor tour and the wonderful people she was about to meet. Diana, for her part, played the role of the gracious queen, surveying her future kingdom. She wore her most expensive cashmere twin set and her largest pearls, ready to make a grand entrance. The facility was even more impressive in person. A long, winding driveway led to a grand, columned entrance. Manicured gardens bloomed with a riot of color. A smiling valet rushed to open our car door. As we walked into the marble-floored lobby, a cheerful woman in a smart navy blazer approached us. This was Mrs. Davis, the facility director, with whom I had already had several discreet and confidential phone calls. "Mrs. Vance, Anna. What an absolute pleasure to have you visit us," she gushed, her smile wide and professionally welcoming. "We are so looking forward to showing you our community." Diana preened under the attention. Mrs. Davis then took us on a tour, her presentation perfectly polished. I watched as my mother's eyes widened at the sight of the indoor pool, the private cinema and the elegant dining room. When they showed us one of the private suites, a beautifully appointed room with a balcony overlooking the gardens, Diana's mask of polite interest slipped into one of open desire. But then her toxic nature resurfaced. As Mrs. Davis momentarily stepped away to take a call, Diana leaned in and whispered to me, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. "Well, the rooms are lovely, I suppose. But the residents seem a bit common, don't they? I saw a woman in the library wearing polyester. I do hope the platinum tier members have a separate, more exclusive wing. I can't be expected to mingle with just anyone." Her snobbery was breathtaking. She was already planning on how to enforce a class system in a place she hadn't even officially entered. After the tour, I enacted the next part of my plan. "Mom, while I go have the big business discussion with Mrs. Davis, I've arranged a little surprise for you," I said brightly. "To help you really get a feel for the place, I've booked you a complimentary spa treatment. A seaweed wrap and a hot stone massage. To help you relax." My mother's eyes lit up. A free spa treatment was an offer she was physically incapable of refusing. "Well," she said, trying to sound as if she were doing them a favor, "I suppose I could be persuaded." As a young attendant whisked my mother away towards the spa wing, Mrs. Davis turned to me, her cheerful tour guide expression shifting to one of quiet, businesslike efficiency. "If you'll follow me to my office, Miss Jennings," she said, her voice now low and professional. "We can finalize the admission paperwork as we discussed." In her quiet, mahogany-paneled office, the reality of my plan came into sharp focus. Mrs. Davis laid the documents out on her desk. It was the long-term residency contract, a thick stack of papers detailing the costs, the services, and the terms of commitment. There was no mention of profit sharing or investment tiers. It was a simple, binding agreement for managed care. As per our previous conversations, Mrs. Davis said, her tone professional and clear, "This contract is for permanent residency. The initial deposit is substantial and, I must stress for our records, entirely non-refundable. It covers the first 6 months and reserves the suite. Based on the legal power of attorney you provided, you are authorized to make this decision on your mother's behalf. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" I looked at the documents. I thought of the years of emotional abuse. I thought of the spilled wine on my broken dreams. I thought of the word burden. There was not a shred of doubt in my mind. "I'm certain," I said. I pulled out the checkbook for the new trust account I had set up, the one where I had consolidated all of Diana's assets. With a hand that was perfectly steady, I wrote a check for the massive non-refundable deposit. I was paying for my mother's imprisonment with her own money. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I signed the contract, my signature a series of sharp, decisive strokes. Anna Jennings on behalf of Diana Vance. It was done. The point of no return had been crossed. My mother was no longer a visitor enjoying a spa day. She was a permanent resident. A managed burden. Mrs. Davis notarized the final page with a satisfying thud of her own stamp. She slid a welcome packet across the desk to me. "Her suite is ready," she said with a polite, practiced smile. "We'll have her things moved from your car while she's in her massage. I trust she will find everything to her liking." I stood up, the transaction complete. I had just signed away my mother's freedom, and I felt nothing but a profound, quiet sense of relief. The cage was locked. I walked out of the office and into the lobby to wait. When my mother emerged from the spa an hour later, glowing and relaxed, she had no idea that she had just walked into the most luxurious, comfortable, and inescapable prison I could design. The first week was quiet. I went back to the empty, silent house that had once been my prison and began the slow, cathartic process of reclaiming it. I packed up my mother's expensive, tasteless clutter. I aired out the rooms, letting fresh, clean air chase away the lingering scent of her cloying perfume. I set up my architectural drafting table in the center of the living room, a place where it had never been allowed. For the first time in years, the space felt like it was mine. I was free. Diana, in her gilded cage, was living her fantasy. She called me every day, her voice full of smug satisfaction, to regale me with tales of the Primrose Estate. She gushed about the simply divine sea bass she'd had for dinner, about the fascinating retired judge she'd played bridge with, about the wonderfully attentive staff who catered to her every whim. She was so intoxicated by the luxury and the attention that she hadn't yet realized her visit was stretching into day 8, then day 9. The call I was waiting for came on the 10th day. I answered on the second ring. The voice on the other end was no longer smug or self-satisfied. It was a shriek of pure, panicked fury. "Anna, what is the meaning of this?" she screamed, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. "I just spoke with that dreadful Mrs. Davis. I told her I was ready for you to come pick me up. And she told me I'm a permanent resident. She showed me a contract. With my name on it." I let her tirade continue, a torrent of accusations, threats, and insults. She called me ungrateful, manipulative, a monster. She demanded I come and get her immediately. I just listened, my expression calm, letting her exhaust her rage. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was quiet, devoid of all emotion. It was as calm and steady as a frozen lake. "Why would you want to leave, Mom? I thought you were happy there. You said the sea base was divine." "Don't be a smartass," she shrieked. "This isn't a resort, it's a prison. Get me out of here." "A prison with a spa, a 5-star chef, and round-the-clock medical attention?" I asked, my voice still dangerously calm. "Mom, that's not a prison. That's the life of leisure you demanded. The life you drained my savings for. The life you ruined my career to keep." "I did no such thing." "Really?" I replied. "So the wine on my laptop was an accident? Calling me a failed daughter was just a slip of the tongue?" The line went silent. For the first time she had no answer. I let the silence hang for a moment before I delivered the final devastating blow. "A few weeks ago you looked me in the eye and screamed at me. You said, and I quote, 'You have been my biggest burden since the day you were born.'" There was a confused, sputtering silence on the other end of the line. "It has everything to do with it," I replied, my voice unwavering. "For years I carried that. I put my life on hold. I paid your bills. I let you sabotage my future. I did everything I could to make your life easier, to lift your burden. But I finally realized you were right. I'm a daughter, not a professional caregiver. Dealing with you full-time is a burden I'm not equipped to handle. So," I continued, "I did the only loving, responsible thing a good daughter could do. I hired professionals. You need round-the-clock care, Mom. You need someone to manage your delicate nerves and your stressful life. I was clearly not up to the task. So I put that burden down. You're in their care now. They'll manage you." I paused, letting the words land with their full, crushing weight. "As for your money, don't worry. It's all going towards your care. You finally got the life of leisure you always wanted. You just won't be able to leave." "Anna, don't you dare," she started to scream, but I didn't wait to hear the rest. I hung up the phone. Then with a single satisfying tap of my finger I blocked her number. I blocked the main number for the Primrose Estate. The silence that followed was the most profound and peaceful silence I have ever known. The gilded cage was locked. The burden had been lifted. I stood in the middle of my quiet, sunlit living room, And for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt absolutely, completely, and gloriously free.